Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be tackling personality psychology
Oh, wow.
using a Grade Guru study guide.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's for a whole first-year university course. So
Really?
yeah, it's pretty comprehensive.
Wow.
Like it's everything you'd learn in a first-year course on personality psychology. So
Oh.
should be pretty in-depth,
Yeah.
but fun.
I'm excited.
I'm
Sounds like it'll be a great overview for anyone who wants to understand, like, how psychologists think about what makes us tick.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's surprisingly relevant stuff.
Oh, yeah.
To, like, everything from your relationships
Right.
to, like, your career choices.
Totally. So to start off, Chapter 1 asks the question, what is personality?
Right.
And this Grade Guru guide defines it as consistent patterns of thoughts,
Yeah.
emotions,
Right.
and behaviors.
Right.
And it also emphasizes individual differences.
Makes sense.
So, like, have you ever wondered why, like, you and your friend might react totally differently to the same situation?
Yeah, all the time.
That's what personality psychology tries to explain.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting about this, though? The Grade Guru Guide, it points out
Yeah.
that it's not just about, like, your innate traits, right? Like, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert,
Uh-huh.
it's also about how those traits actually interact with your environment.
That's interesting.
Like, they give this example of an extrovert who, most of the time loves being around people, but
Right.
might actually prefer being alone, after, like, a long day of socializing or something.
Yeah, I could see that.
Even the most outgoing person, sometimes needs a break.
Absolutely. You reminds me of those nature versus nurture debates.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how much of who we are is predetermined by our genes
Uh-huh.
and how much is influenced by our upbringing and our experiences,
Right. That's a classic question in psychology.
Yeah, it's like one of those big questions. And the Grade Guru Guide actually highlights a bunch of other big questions like, who am I?
Right. Yeah.
What makes me unique?
We've all asked ourselves that.
Yeah. But what's really cool is how the text connects personality to, like, real-life outcomes, like how conscientiousness, being organized and responsible, can actually predict job success.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. It's like maybe all those late-night study sessions
Yeah.
and, like, color-coded notes are actually paying off.
Right. It's not just for nothing.
Yeah,
I mean, conscientiousness is really valuable in a lot of parts of life,
totally.
not just, like, in school.
Okay, so we've got this basic definition of personality,
Okay.
but how do we break it down
Yeah.
and measure it? So the Grade Guru Guide gets into that in Chapter 2,
Uh-huh.
and it brings up this concept of traits,
Okay.
which are like the building blocks of personality.
Gotcha.
And the guide introduces us to the Big Five model.
Right. The Big Five.
Yeah.
Very famous.
It's like the periodic table of personality, basically.
Right. I like that.
Yeah, so it categorizes people based on 5 broad dimensions.
I'm listening.
Openness,
Okay.
conscientiousness,
Yep.
extroversion,
Got it.
agreeableness,
Uh-huh.
and neuroticism.
Right.
And I love how they made it into this catchy acronym, OCEAN.
It is catchy. Yeah.
So, like, tell me more about these traits.
Sure.
What does it actually mean to be high or low in each dimension?
Well, let's take openness, for example.
Okay.
Someone who's high in openness.
Yeah.
They're curious, imaginative. They love trying new things,
Oh, okay.
Like they might enjoy traveling to different countries,
Right.
trying new foods, or maybe even, just exploring different ideas like philosophy or something. On the other hand, someone who's low in openness,
Uh-huh.
they might prefer routine, familiar environments, like
Right.
sticking to what they know,
So you're saying that, like, someone who loves traveling to, like, exotic places and trying all this crazy new food,
Yeah.
they're probably high in openness.
Probably, yeah.
And then someone who's more like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay home and cook my same, 5 dishes.
Right, exactly.
They're probably low in openness.
It's about, like, how open you are to new experiences and new ideas.
Gotcha.
And this kind of logic, right,
Yeah.
applies to the other traits, too.
Yeah.
So, for example, someone high in conscientiousness,
Uh-huh.
they're very organized, they're responsible, they're reliable.
Gotcha.
You can always count on them
Yeah.
to, like, meet a deadline or
Right.
show up on time.
Totally.
Someone low in conscientiousness, though, they might be more spontaneous, maybe a little less detail-oriented,
Like messy.
Yeah, potentially messy, a little disorganized, yeah.
I can definitely see how understanding these traits could be so helpful in, like, everyday life.
Right.
Like, if you're forming a study group, you probably want someone high in conscientiousness.
Definitely.
To keep everyone on track.
To make sure things actually get done.
Exactly.
That's a great example.
And the guide also mentions the Ekexako model.
Oh, yeah.
Which actually adds another dimension to the mix.
Interesting.
Honesty, humility.
Honesty, humility.
Yeah, so this trait reflects like a person's sincerity, fairness, and their lack of egotism.
So someone high in honesty, humility is less likely to be manipulative or to take advantage of a situation, like for personal gain?
Yeah, basically. That sounds like a pretty desirable trait.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It makes you wonder, though,
Yeah.
where do these trait models even come from?
Right.
Like, how did psychologists decide on these specific dimensions?
Well, it actually all started with something called the lexical approach.
The lexical approach.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
So basically, researchers analyzed like thousands and thousands of words that describe personality across different languages and cultures.
Wow, that's a lot of words.
Yeah, a lot of words. And they were looking for patterns.
Okay.
Like clusters of words that just seem to go together.
Oh.
It's kind of like they were linguistic detectives.
Right.
Searching for these like hidden clues about, personality
I like that.
in our language.
That's cool.
Yeah. And what they found is that these 5 or 6 dimensions kept popping up, suggesting that like they represent some core aspect of human nature.
Oh, wow.
That's recognized across different cultures.
That's really cool.
Yeah. But, the guide does mention that some researchers, they argue that models like the Big Five are just too broad and that they might miss some cultural nuances.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Human behavior is just so complex that while these models are helpful, like as a framework, they're not perfect.
Right.
It's important to remember that cultures, they shape how personality traits are expressed and how they're valued.
So, like, even if people, like, share certain underlying traits, those traits might manifest really differently, depending on, like, their background.
Exactly.
Exactly. Like extroversion, for example, might look different in a culture that values, like, assertiveness versus one that emphasizes modesty.
That's a good point.
So this makes me think about how much our personalities actually change over time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm definitely not the same person I was 5 years ago.
I hear you.
So the Great Guru Guide talks about this idea of trait stability in Chapter 5.
Okay.
And they mention something called the maturity principle.
The maturity principle, what's that?
Basically, it says that as people age, they tend to become more agreeable and more conscientious.
Interesting.
So, like, as you take on more responsibilities in life, like a job or a family, you need to develop, like, greater self-control and be more considerate of others.
Makes sense.
So it's like life itself kind of pushes us towards those traits.
Oh, yeah.
That are just essential for, being an adult.
Adulting, yeah. But it's not just about responsibilities, though. It's also about personal growth,
Right.
And self-awareness. Like, as we mature, we learn more about ourselves, what's important to us, and, like, how to actually interact with the world more effectively.
This makes me wonder, is there a point where, like, our personalities just become fixed?
Right, yeah.
Or are we constantly evolving?
That's a good question.
Like, throughout our whole lives?
Yeah, are we, like, changing all the time?
Yeah.
It's actually a question that psychologists are still debating.
Really?
Yeah. There is some evidence that suggests that, like, our core personality traits, they do remain fairly stable over time.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't change. Like, we can always learn new skills, adopt new perspectives, even modify certain behaviors.
So even though our personalities might have, like, a certain foundation.
Yeah, a foundation.
We still have the power to shape and refine who we are.
I like that. It's like you're given a set of paints and a canvas.
Okay.
But you get to decide what to create.
I like that analogy.
It's a good one. Right.
So we've talked about traits.
Yeah.
And how they form this, like, foundation of personality. But how do psychologists actually measure these things?
Right. That's the question.
It's not like you could just put someone on a scale and get a reading of their, like, extroversion level.
You'd think it'd be that easy.
Right.
But it's not.
So Chapter 2 dives into the tricky world of personality assessment.
Okay.
And it's full of challenges.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest ones is something called social desirability bias.
Social desirability bias.
Have you ever taken a personality quiz?
Oh, yeah.
And felt like, tempted to answer in a way that makes you look good?
Oh, absolutely.
Even if it wasn't totally honest?
All the time.
Yeah, who wants to admit they're low in agreeableness?
Right.
So how do researchers overcome this bias?
Well, they've come up with some clever strategies. So one of them is using observer reports.
Observer reports?
Yeah, so instead of just relying on, like, self-report questionnaires, they might ask people who know you well, like your friends or your family, to provide, their perspective.
Oh, okay. So, like, get a 360-degree view.
Yeah, get multiple sources.
Another personality.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Another method is behavioral observation.
Behavioral observation.
Yeah, so researchers might actually observe your behavior in specific situations to see, like, how you react.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, they might, put you in a group setting and see how you interact with other people.
It's like turning everyday life into, like, a personality experiment.
Totally. It's all about, like, observing you in your natural habitat.
Wow.
But how do they know if these measures are actually accurate, though?
That's a good question.
That's where these concepts of reliability and validity come in.
Reliability and validity.
Yeah, which the Grade Guru Guide, it explains it really well.
Okay.
So reliability is about consistency, right?
Okay.
A reliable personality test will give you similar results, even if you take it, multiple times.
Makes sense.
Validity is about whether a test is actually measuring what it's supposed to measure.
Oh, okay.
So a reliable test, right? It might tell me, like, oh, you're high in extroversion.
Yeah.
But if it's not valid, it might not actually reflect my true personality.
So, like, a reliable test
Yeah.
could give you consistently wrong information.
Yeah, exactly.
But a valid test would give you correct information.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like the difference between, a broken clock that always shows the wrong time, but it's consistent, versus a working clock that shows the right time.
I like that.
Yeah. And it highlights why it's so important to actually use, well-designed and validated personality tests.
Okay, so we've established that measuring personality is complex.
Very complex.
But let's get back to that nature versus nurture debate.
Okay.
For a moment.
Yeah.
Chapter 6 really digs into, like, the role that our genes play in shaping who we are.
Our genes.
Yeah.
The building blocks of life.
And they introduce this concept of heritability.
Heritability.
Which is a measure of how much variation in a trait within a population can be attributed to genetic differences.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if extroversion, for example, has a heritability of, say, 50%.
Okay, 50%.
Does that mean that, like, half of my extroversion is determined by my genes?
Right.
And the other half is influenced by my environment?
That's actually a really common misconception.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so heritability, it doesn't actually tell us about individual cases.
Okay.
It tells us about population.
So it's about the relative contribution of genes and environment to the variation we see in a trait across a group of people.
Yes, precisely.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Good.
So a high heritability for a trait, it doesn't mean it's set in stone.
Okay.
It just means that genes play, like, a significant role in the differences we see between people.
Exactly.
The Grade Guru Guide actually uses this example of a child who's naturally shy.
Okay.
And they say that, like, with a supportive environment, encouragement to try new things, opportunities to build social skills, that child can actually blossom into a more outgoing person.
That's a good point.
So even if you're, like, genetically predisposed to a certain trait, your environment can still have a major impact on how that trait is expressed.
Absolutely. It's like you have the blueprint for a house.
Okay.
The blueprint lays out the basic structure, but you can make changes to the design, choose different materials, and you can ultimately create, a really unique home.
I like that analogy. It reminds me that we're not just, like, products of our genes.
Yeah.
We have the power to shape our own, like, destinies.
Totally.
And speaking of shaping destinies, the Grade Guru Guide highlights this influence of non-shared environments.
Non-shared environment.
Yeah.
What are those?
So it's not just about, like, our family upbringing.
Yeah.
It's also about those unique experiences.
Right.
That, like, mold us into individuals.
So, like, even siblings who grew up in the same household. Right.
Exactly.
They'll have different friends, different teachers.
Right.
different hobbies, different experiences that all kind of contribute to shaping who they are.
Think about all the friendships you've formed.
Right.
All the challenges you've overcome, the books you've read. All of those unique experiences have shaped who you are today.
Totally.
This brings us to a pretty fascinating question. How are our personalities wired into our brains?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm intrigued.
So Chapter 7 gets into that.
Okay.
It dives into the biological underpinnings of personality.
Biological underpinnings, okay.
Yeah, like exploring the connections between our traits and specific brain structures and chemicals.
Wow, so like the physical stuff.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
It's kind of magical how something as abstract as personality can be linked to, like physical structures in our brains.
It is kind of wild.
So, for example, the guide talks about the amygdala.
The amygdala?
Which is this little almond-shaped structure that plays a key role in processing emotions.
Okay.
Particularly fear and anxiety.
Interesting.
And it turns out that people who are high in neuroticism, they tend to have a more reactive amygdala.
Oh, wow.
So it's like their brains are wired to be more sensitive to threat and stress.
That makes sense.
And on the other end of the spectrum, research suggests that people who are high in extroversion might be more sensitive to dopamine.
Dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
Right, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward.
Interesting.
And this might explain why extroverts are like more drawn to social interaction and novelty, because those activities trigger a greater release of dopamine.
It's like they're chasing that dopamine high.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It makes me wonder if we could manipulate these brain chemicals
interesting.
to change our personalities.
That is an interesting question.
You know, I think it's something that's being explored in the field of neuropharmacology.
Right.
But it's a complex issue with ethical considerations.
Totally.
Should we be tampering with, you know,
like
the very essence of who we are?
Exactly. That's a really important question to consider.
But even without, like, altering our brain chemistry.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how our biology influences our behavior and our personality.
It really is. And that brings us to another interesting perspective, which is evolutionary psychology.
Okay, evolutionary psychology.
Which the Great Guru Guide explores in Chapter 8.
How does, like, evolution fit into the personality puzzle?
Okay, so evolutionary psychologists, they argue that many of our personality traits, they actually evolved because they provided, like, survival or reproductive advantages to our ancestors.
Interesting.
Like, for example, extroversion might have been beneficial for, like, forming alliances, right? And finding mates. Whereas conscientiousness might have been important for, like, planning ahead. And ensuring the survival of your offspring.
So our personalities are the result of thousands of years of natural selection.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's really cool.
It is cool, but it's important to remember these are just theories.
Right.
And there's a lot of debate about the evolutionary origins of personality.
Makes sense.
But the Great Guru Guide does a good job of, like, presenting both sides of the argument.
So it's all about considering different perspectives and critically evaluating the evidence.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious to dive into a theory that's always been a bit mysterious to me.
Okay, which one?
Freudian theory.
Ah, yes.
Great Guru Guide devotes a whole chapter to it.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Chapter 9, right?
Yeah, Chapter 9.
It's a mind bender.
Yeah, and I feel like it's something we can't ignore.
It's pretty foundational to psychology, so.
So Freudian theory, or psychoanalytic theory, it delves into the unconscious mind.
Right, those hidden desires.
Yeah, all those hidden desires and conflicts that we're not even aware of.
Yeah, it's like there's this whole other world operating beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy.
It is a little creepy, but it's also really fascinating.
And Freud proposed that our personalities are shaped by this interplay of three psychic structures.
Three psychic structures.
Yeah, so there's the id, the ego, and the superego.
The superego. Okay.
Break it down for me. What are these structures all about?
All right, so the id, it's the most primitive part of our personality. It's driven by, like, our instinctual urges. seeking immediate gratification
Okay.
without any regard for the consequences.
Oh, wow.
It's like the devil on your shoulder whispering like, eat the whole cake.
Right.
Stay in bed all day.
Yeah, do what feels good.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think we all have a little bit of that devil inside us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what about the superego?
Okay, the superego, it's like the angel on your other shoulder.
Okay.
Representing your internalized morals and values,
Right.
Like the voice of conscience telling you to do the right thing, even if it's not the most pleasurable.
So it's the superego that makes you feel guilty when you eat that whole cake.
Exactly. Or when you, hit that snooze button one too many times. And then there's the ego, the poor mediator, caught in the middle of this like angel and devil showdown.
Yeah. Sounds stressful.
It's a tough job. Its job is to actually balance the demands of the id and the superego.
Right.
It's trying to find realistic ways to, like, satisfy our desires while still adhering to, social norms and moral principles.
That's tricky.
It's a tough balancing act.
And Freud argued that this constant internal struggle between the id, the ego, and the superego, shapes our personalities and influences our behavior.
Exactly. It's like this ongoing play that's happening in our minds.
And this brings us to another Freudian concept, defense mechanisms.
Defense mechanisms, yes. What are those all about?
So defense mechanisms are unconscious strategies that the ego uses to protect us from anxiety and unpleasant emotions.
That makes sense.
It's like our minds have like built-in defense systems to shield us from psychological pain.
We need those sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So like when you get rejected for a date and you tell yourself, oh, I wasn't that into them anyway, that's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, that's classic rationalization.
Oh, okay.
Or how about denial? Like refusing to believe that your favorite band broke up, even though there's like a news article about it.
I've definitely been there.
We've all been there.
But the Great Guru Guide points out that while some of Freud's ideas might seem like outdated.
Right. Some of them are a little bit old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Maybe a little controversial.
His work still influences psychology today.
Oh, absolutely.
Like concepts like defense mechanisms are still widely used in like clinical psychology.
Yeah, for sure.
And Freud's emphasis on the unconscious mind has had a lasting impact.
Huge impact.
On how we understand human behavior.
It really has.
Okay, so we've explored like the building blocks of personality, the role of genes and environment, the biological underpinnings of our traits, and even this like mysterious world of the unconscious mind.
Right. We've gone deep.
Yeah, we've gone pretty deep.
Into the mind.
So what's next?
What's next on our journey? I'm excited to find out.
Well, now that we kind of understand the structure of personality, let's explore what drives us from within.
Oh, okay. What motivates us?
So chapter 10 delves into this topic. Motives.
Motives, cool.
So how are motives different from traits?
That's a good question.
So like, I might be a generally introverted person, but if I'm really passionate about a particular project, expert.
I might actually act more extroverted, in like meetings or presentations because I'm so driven by this project.
So it's like the situation can activate certain motives.
Exactly.
That like temporarily override our typical traits.
Right. It's like they're more dynamic, than traits. And the Great Guru Guide gives this example of McLuhan's theory of needs. Which identifies 3 primary motives: achievement, power, and affiliation.
Okay, so let's unpack those.
Sure.
What does it mean to have a high need for achievement?
So someone with a high need for achievement, they're driven by this desire to excel. Like to accomplish these really challenging tasks. And they're constantly trying to improve themselves. They really thrive on feedback. They set like high standards for themselves, and they're always striving to reach their full potential.
So like those are the people who are always pushing themselves to get that A+ on the exam.
Yeah, exactly.
Or land that dream internship.
Totally. Those are the high achievers.
And then there's the need for power.
Right. The need for power.
Which is all about like having an impact on others.
Influencing people.
Right. Influencing their decisions and controlling situations.
So often, people with a high need for power, you'll see them kind of naturally gravitate towards leadership roles.
That makes sense.
They enjoy being in charge,
right,
making decisions, persuading others to follow their lead.
Okay, and then what about the need for affiliation?
Right. So people high in the nig for affiliation, they're motivated by this desire to form and maintain close relationships.
Okay.
They really value like connection and harmony.
Right.
A sense of belonging.
So they're the friends who are always like organizing social gatherings.
Totally.
And making sure everyone feels included.
Exactly.
They're the glue that holds the group together.
I like that. The glue.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's amazing how these different motives like shape our goals and our priorities.
Yeah.
The guide actually provides some like real world examples.
Oh, okay.
Like how entrepreneurs, they often display a high need for achievement.
Makes sense.
While politicians might have a stronger need for power.
That's interesting. It makes you wonder, like, if you knew someone's dominant motives, could you actually predict their career path?
That's a good question. It seems like understanding these motives could be so valuable.
Yeah.
Not just for personal growth, but also for professional success.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the Great Guru Guide.
Yeah.
It even gets into like how psychologists measure these motives.
Okay, how did he do that?
They talk about the thematic apperception test, or TA.
The TAT, okay.
Which is a pretty fascinating way to like tap into those unconscious desires and needs.
Okay, tell me more about this TA.
So it's a projective test.
A projective test, what's that?
Basically, it presents you with ambiguous stimuli.
Okay.
Like pictures or stories. And asks you to interpret them.
Oh.
And the idea is that your interpretations actually reveal your underlying motives.
Interesting.
Even if you're not consciously aware of them.
So it's like a psychological Rorschach test?
Kinda, yeah.
That's cool.
So like the Great Guru Guide gives this great example of how someone who frequently tells stories about like hard work and success they might score high on the need for achievement.
Right.
Even if they wouldn't consciously describe themselves as, like, ambitious.
Wow. So it's like peeling back the layers of the onion, revealing these, like, hidden forces that are driving our behavior.
I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It highlights how complex and, like, multifaceted human motivation really is.
It really will.
We're not always aware of what's truly driving us.
Totally.
So this makes me wonder, like, if motives are more dynamic than traits, can we actually change our motives?
That's a good question.
Like, if I wanted to develop a stronger need for achievement, could I actually do that?
That's something that researchers are still kind of exploring. Okay. Like, while our basic motives, they might have like a biological basis, they're also influenced by our experiences and our beliefs.
So if I surrounded myself with like high achieving people and started setting like more challenging goals for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Could I actually like shift my motivational profile?
It's possible. It's like you're training your brain to focus on different rewards.
Oh, hey.
And that makes me think about the power of mindset.
Yeah.
Like, if we believe we can change, maybe we actually can.
That's a good point.
Our beliefs and expectations, they can really shape our behavior.
Yeah.
And, ultimately our personalities.
This brings us to this, like, crucial aspect of personality that we haven't really explored yet.
Right.
The cognitive side.
The cognitive side.
So Chapter 11 gets into how our thoughts and perceptions shape who we are.
Right. It's all about how we process information.
Yeah.
How we interpret events, how we make sense of the world.
So, like, two people might experience the same event.
Yeah.
But their thoughts and interpretations will shape their emotional reactions and ultimately their personalities.
It's like they're seeing the world through different lenses.
And the guide highlights the concept of locus of control.
Locus of control. Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Which is a great example of how our cognitive style influences our experience.
So remind me, what is locus of control all about?
It's basically about whether you believe you have control over what happens in your life.
Right.
So people with an internal locus of control, they believe that their actions have a direct impact on their outcomes.
So they see themselves as like the masters of their own fate.
Yeah, they're like the captains of their own ships. You know,
like
steering their lives in the direction they want to go.
So they're the ones who say, Like, if I study hard, I'll get good grades.
Exactly.
If I put in the effort, I can achieve my goals.
Right. They believe that their efforts will lead to positive outcomes.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then people with an external locus of control, they tend to believe that, like, things are mostly determined by luck.
Oh.
Or fate, or, like, external forces.
Right, so they kind of feel like they're at the mercy of circumstances.
Exactly. They feel like they have very little power
to
influence their own destinies.
So they might say things like, no matter how hard I study, the teacher just doesn't like me.
Yeah, or, like, no matter what I do, I'm always unlucky.
Right, they feel like things are just kind of happening to them. They don't have a lot of control.
And the Great Guru Guide points out that having an internal locus of control is actually associated with greater motivation, resilience, and overall well-being.
That makes sense.
Right, because if you believe you have control over your life, you're more likely to take action, persevere through challenges, and you'll feel this, like, sense of agency.
It's empowering.
It's like you're holding the reins of your own life rather than being like a passive passenger.
Totally. That's a great way to put it.
This makes me wonder, like, can we change our locus of control?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, if someone has an external locus of control,
Yeah.
can they, like, shift to a more internal perspective?
Is that possible?
Yeah.
That's something that psychologists are still exploring.
Okay.
But there's some evidence to suggest that it might be possible.
Okay.
Like therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example.
Right.
They often focus on helping people, identify and challenge their negative thought patterns.
Right.
And develop like a more empowering belief system.
So it's like retraining your brain
Yeah.
to see yourself as the driver.
Exactly.
And this highlights, how our thoughts and beliefs can have such a profound impact on our experiences and personalities.
It's all connected.
It reminds me of another cognitive concept that the Great Guru Guide mentions.
Okay, what's that?
Explanatory style.
Explanatory style.
So explanatory style is basically how we explain events to ourselves, particularly like negative events.
Interesting.
So do you tend to see the glass as half full or half empty?
That's a good question.
Do you attribute setbacks to personal failings or to, like, external factors?
Right. So it's like, if I fail a test, do I blame myself for not studying hard enough?
Right.
Or do I blame the teacher for, like, making the test too hard?
Exactly.
I see. Okay.
The Great Guru Guide gives the example of how an optimist might attribute a failed test to a lack of preparation.
Right.
But a pessimist might blame their own intelligence.
They think they're just, like, not smart enough.
Right.
Okay.
Seems like explanatory style could have a huge impact on our self-esteem.
Totally.
And our ability to cope with challenges.
Absolutely.
A pessimistic explanatory style can lead to, like, this downward spiral of negativity.
Yeah, you get stuck in that loop.
But an optimistic outlook can help us bounce back from setbacks.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Way more easily.
You're more resilient.
It's like the difference between getting stuck in the mud and finding a way to climb out.
I like that.
And speaking of climbing,
let's
talk about intelligence.
Intelligence.
So, chapter 12 tackles this, like, often misunderstood topic.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it really is.
What does it even mean to be intelligent?
Right. Is it just about, like, book smarts and IQ scores?
That's what a lot of people think.
The Great Guru Guide, it actually does a great job of unpacking the different theories of intelligence.
That's cool.
And highlighting how it's much more than just a single number on a test.
Right. There's so much more to it.
So tell me more about these different theories.
All right. So one of the most influential theories is Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence.
Multiple intelligences. Okay.
Which argues that there are at least like 8 different types of intelligence.
Wow, 8. Okay.
Yeah. So we've got linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, musical, bodily, kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic.
Wow. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
So someone might be like a brilliant musician, but struggle with math.
Right. Or they might be a gifted athlete,
right,
but not so great at writing essays.
So it's like everyone has their own unique blend of strengths and weaknesses.
It's like a buffet of intelligences.
I like that. A buffet of intelligences.
And you get to choose your favorite.
So where do IQ tests fit into all of this?
Well, IQ tests are designed to measure general cognitive ability, which is like this broad factor that underlies a lot of different cognitive skills.
So a high IQ suggests that you're generally good at problem solving.
Yeah.
Reasoning, learning new things.
Exactly.
But it's important to remember that IQ tests are just one measure of cognitive ability.
It's not the whole picture.
And they don't capture the full complexity of human intelligence.
Yeah, for sure.
The guide also mentions something called the Flynn effect.
The Flynn effect, what's that?
It refers to this observation that average IQ scores have been steadily rising over the past century.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant trend.
So what could be causing that?
Well, there are a number of theories, including like improvements in nutrition.
Right, people are eating better.
Education, and exposure to more complex information.
Yeah, through technology and stuff.
Through technology.
That makes sense.
So it's like, as our environment becomes more intellectually stimulating, our brains are kind of like evolving.
Right.
Keep up.
We're adapting.
But it also highlights how intelligence isn't like this fixed trait.
Right. It's not set in stone.
It's something that can be influenced by our experiences and our environment.
It's malleable.
This makes me wonder, what role does personality play in all of this?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, does our personality influence how we approach learning and problem solving?
That's something that researchers are actively exploring. But there is some evidence that certain personality traits, like conscientious, for example, and openness to experience, are linked to like greater academic achievement.
So like those organized and curious individuals.
Yeah, they might have a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, an edge in the classroom.
In the classroom,
But also important to remember that everyone learns differently.
Right.
And there are many paths to success.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to learning.
This brings us to the more personal side of personality.
Okay, the personal side.
Which the Grade Guru Guide explores in chapters 13 and 14.
All right.
We're talking about emotions.
Emotions.
And the self-concept.
The self-concept.
Like the way we see ourselves.
Right. So it's all about how our emotions shape our experiences.
Yeah.
And how our self-perceptions influence our interactions with the world.
Exactly.
Cool.
Okay, so let's start with emotions.
Okay, emotions.
How do our personalities influence how we like experience and express emotions?
Well, think about the trait of neuroticism, right?
Okay, neuroticism.
People high in neuroticism, they tend to experience more negative emotions like anxiety, sadness, anger.
So it's like their emotional volume is turned up higher.
Exactly.
They're more sensitive to stress.
Right.
They're more likely to ruminate on negative thoughts.
Okay.
And their emotional reactions, they might be more intense and longer lasting.
It's like their internal alarm system is constantly going off.
Right. It can be really overwhelming for them.
This can actually take a toll on their physical and mental health.
Absolutely. Chronic stress is no joke.
On the other hand, people who are low in neuroticism, they tend to be more like emotionally stable.
Right.
Yeah, more even-keeled.
Less reactive to stress. And better able to bounce back from challenges.
They might still experience stress.
Right.
But they're just better equipped to manage it effectively.
This makes me think about coping mechanisms.
Coping mechanisms, how we deal with all that stress.
What are some other different ways that people deal with stress?
So the Grade Guru Guide, it explains that there are two main types of coping.
Okay, two main types.
Problem-focused coping.
Okay.
And emotion-focused coping.
Okay, break it down for me. What's the difference?
All right, so problem-focused coping. It's all about taking action to directly address the source of the stress.
Okay.
So if you're stressed about an upcoming exam, for example, a problem-focused approach would be to create a study schedule, right? Review your notes, maybe seek help from your professor.
So you're tackling the problem head on.
Exactly.
Like a warrior going into battle.
That's a great analogy.
And then emotion-focused coping.
Yeah, so emotion-focused coping is about managing your emotional response to the stress.
Okay.
Rather than trying to, like, change the situation itself.
So it's more about, like, finding ways to soothe your anxiety.
Yeah.
Regulate your emotions.
Exactly.
Like a diplomat seeking a peaceful resolution.
I like that analogy, a diplomat,
So emotion-focused coping strategies might include things like exercise, meditation, talking to a friend.
Right.
Or doing activities that bring you joy and relaxation.
It's about finding healthy ways to, like, de-stress and recharge. Yeah. So you can face the challenge with a clearer mind.
And the guide points out
Yeah.
that both types of coping can be helpful.
Right. It depends on the situation.
Depending on the situation.
Exactly. Like if it's a problem you can actually directly solve,
Right.
then problem-focused coping is usually the best way to go.
Okay.
But if it's a situation that's totally out of your control,
Yeah.
then emotion-focused coping can be super helpful for just managing your stress.
Right.
And taking care of your well-being.
This makes me wonder, like, are certain personality types better at coping with stress than others?
Good question.
That's something that researchers have, investigated.
Yeah, what have they found?
And there's evidence that suggests that certain traits like conscientiousness, optimism, and hardiness are associated with, like, more effective coping.
So, like, those organized, positive, and resilient individuals, they might have a little bit of a built-in advantage when it comes to dealing with stress.
Right.
Makes sense.
But even if you don't naturally have those traits, you can still learn and develop coping skills that will help you navigate life's challenges.
It's like building up your resilience muscle.
This brings us to a more serious topic, but one that's important to discuss. Personality disorders.
Personality disorders, all right?
So Chapter 19 delves into these, like, complex.
Yeah, they are complex.
And often misunderstood conditions.
And it's really important to approach this topic with sensitivity.
Absolutely.
And to remember that personality disorders, they're not simply quirks, or flaws in character.
These are serious mental health conditions.
Yes, absolutely.
That cause significant distress.
Right.
And impairment in a person's life.
They really affect people's ability to function.
So these are not just people who are a bit, difficult or eccentric.
It's more than that.
These are individuals who are struggling with, like, deep-seated patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior that are causing them real pain.
It's true.
And preventing them from, like, living fulfilling lives.
It's important to remember that.
The Great Guru Guide
Yeah.
does a good job of explaining the different types
Okay.
of personality disorders and how they manifest.
So can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so one well-known personality disorder is borderline personality disorder.
Borderline personality disorder, okay.
Which is characterized by intense emotional instability.
Okay.
Fear of abandonment, impulsivity, and, like, difficulty maintaining stable relationships.
So these are individuals who might experience, like extreme mood swings.
Yeah, they might engage in self-destructive behaviors and have a hard time trusting others.
It can be really challenging.
And another common personality disorder is narcissistic personality disorder.
Narcissistic personality disorder.
Which is characterized by, like, a grandiose sense of self-importance. A need for admiration and a lack of empathy.
So they might come across as, like, arrogant, entitled.
Yeah, and dismissive of others' feelings.
Exactly.
It's important to remember
that
these are just two examples.
Right, just a couple.
And there are many other types.
Lots of different personality disorders.
Of personality disorders?
Yeah.
The key takeaway.
What is it?
Is that these conditions are complex.
Right.
And they often stem from this, like, combination of genetic and environmental factors.
It's usually a mix of things.
And they require professional help.
If you're struggling, it's important to reach out.
So if someone suspects they or someone they know might be struggling with a personality disorder, what should they do?
The first step is to seek professional help.
Okay, seek professional help.
Yeah, a mental health professional.
Right.
They can assess the situation.
Yeah.
Provide a diagnosis if appropriate.
And what are some of the, like, treatment options?
Okay, so treatment options?
For personality disorders.
Well, therapy is often the cornerstone of treatment.
Therapy. Okay.
Yeah, there are therapies like dialectical behavior therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Those have been shown to be effective in helping people with personality disorders, manage their symptoms and improve their quality of life.
So there is hope.
Absolutely.
For people who are struggling.
Yeah, recovery is definitely possible.
With the right support and treatment.
With the right support, for sure.
And it's important to remember that people with personality disorders, they're not defined by their diagnosis.
It's just one part of who they are.
Right. They're individuals with their own unique strengths, talents, and stories.
Absolutely. We need to see the whole person.
That's a really powerful message.
It is.
It reminds us to approach these topics with empathy and understanding.
Always.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into personality.
Yeah, we have.
From, like, the basic building blocks of traits
Right.
to this like complex world
Yeah.
of personality disorders.
It's a whole spectrum.
What are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listener will remember from all of this?
Well, I hope they walk away with like a deeper appreciation for just how complex human personality really is.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just one-dimensional beings.
We're this fascinating blend
Yeah.
of nature and nurture shaped by our genes, our environment, our experiences, and our choices.
It's like we're all walking around with these intricate tapestries.
I love that.
Woven from countless threads.
It's beautiful, yeah.
And I hope our listener also gain like some insights
Yeah.
into their own personality
Right.
and the personalities of the people around them.
It's all about self-awareness and understanding others.
It's like this deep dive has given them this new lens.
Oh, I like that. A new lens.
Yeah, through which to view themselves and the world. That's a great way to put it. And hopefully it sparks some curiosity to learn more.
To keep exploring.
Because personality psychology is a fascinating field.
It really is. There's so much to discover.
Okay, I have one final question for you.
Okay, shoot.
And it's a big one.
I'm ready.
Do you think we are ultimately masters of our own destinies?
Ooh, that is a big question.
Can we change our personalities if we
Well.
really want to? That's a question that, like, philosophers and psychologists have been debating for
Okay.
centuries.
One of those big existential questions.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
What do you think?
I think the answer is complex.
Okay.
We certainly have more agency
Right.
than we might think.
Okay.
We can learn new skills,
Yeah.
adopt new perspectives, and even modify certain behaviors.
So while our personalities
Uh-huh.
might have like a certain foundation,
Uh-huh.
we're not simply like puppets of our genes
Right.
or our past experiences.
We have a power.
You know, as we're wrapping up this deep dive into personality,
Yeah.
I'm struck by just how much ground we've covered.
Me too. It's a
Like we've explored this whole continent
Right.
of knowledge, you know, from the mountains of biological influences
Mm.
to the rivers of social interactions.
I like that analogy.
And we've uncovered some hidden gems along the way.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like those fascinating insights that connect personality to, you know,
Yeah.
our everyday lives.
Right, like our career choices, our relationships.
Yeah, how we handle stress.
Exactly.
Speaking of stress,
Yeah.
there's one more fascinating connection that I wanted to touch on
Okay, what's that?
that the Great Guru Guide highlights.
Okay.
The link between personality and physical health.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Chapter 18
Yeah.
gets into this,
Okay.
and I'd love to explore it with you.
Sure, I'm happy to.
So it talks about psychoneuroimmunology.
Psychoneuroimmunology.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful.
It's basically how our thoughts,
Okay.
emotions, and behaviors
Mm.
can actually influence
What?
our immune system
Wow.
and our susceptibility to disease.
So you're saying that our personalities can have a direct impact
Yeah,
on our physical well-being.
it seems that way.
That's pretty amazing.
So the guide talks about,
Yeah.
you know, the classic
Right.
type A and type B
Yeah, type A and type B.
personality patterns.
Right. I've all heard of those.
Type A individuals are often described as ambitious, competitive,
Mhm.
time urgent,
Right. Always in a hurry.
and sometimes a bit hostile.
It's like they're always running a race.
Right, even if there's no finish line in sight.
They're always on the go.
Yeah, exactly.
And research has actually shown
Yeah.
that these type A characteristics, like the hostility
Uh-huh.
and that constant sense of urgency,
Right.
they can actually increase the risk of heart disease.
Oh, wow. So their personalities are literally putting stress
Yeah, it's like they're putting wear and tear
on their cardiovascular system.
on their bodies.
It's a powerful reminder
Yes.
that our mental and physical health
Yeah.
are so interconnected.
Absolutely.
Our thoughts and emotions
Right.
can have this like direct impact
Yeah, they're not
on our physiological processes.
It's all connected.
And it's not just about those negative personality traits.
Oh, okay.
The guide also explains
Mm.
how positive traits,
Yeah.
like optimism and resilience,
Right, those are the good ones.
can actually have this protective effect in
Interesting.
their health.
So optimists tend to have better coping skills.
Yeah.
Stronger immune systems.
Right.
And they're just more likely to engage in, healthy behaviors.
So they might be more likely to exercise,
Yeah.
eat a balanced diet,
Right.
get enough sleep.
They're taking care of themselves.
It's like they have this built-in health advocate
Right.
whispering in their ear,
Guiding them along.
Guiding them toward those choices that support their well-being.
That's a great way to put it.
And then there's resilience.
Resilience. Yeah.
That incredible ability to bounce back from adversity.
To adapt.
To thrive in the face of challenges.
Resilient people, they tend to find meaning in those difficult experiences. They draw on their social support networks, and they just maintain that sense of hope.
Yeah.
Even in the darkest of times.
It's really inspiring.
It is.
It makes you realize that we all have the potential for resilience within us.
Absolutely. We all have that capacity.
And it's not like this fixed trait.
Right. It's not something you're born with or without.
It's something we can cultivate.
We can build it up.
Yeah, through practice.
Yeah.
And by, adopting healthy coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
So it's like building up
our
psychological immune system.
I like that.
Strengthening our ability
to ward
off the negative effects
of stress and adversity.
That's
a great way to think about it.
And it's never too late to start.
Right. You can start today.
You can start by practicing mindfulness, cultivating gratitude, building strong relationships, engaging in activities that bring you joy and meaning.
These are all great tips.
What a powerful message to leave our listener with.
Yeah, I hope they feel inspired.
It seems like this deep dive into personality hasn't just expanded our understanding of, human nature.
Right.
It's also given us some valuable tools.
Yeah, practical tips.
For living, healthier, happier, more fulfilling lives.
I think that's a great takeaway.
It's like we've been given this, treasure map.
Okay.
To navigate the complexities.
Of life. And of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
So, with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into personality.
All right.
Thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
On this incredible exploration.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
Okay.
For another adventure into the depths of knowledge.
Sounds good.